Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Stop Press. Before we understand what this article is, let's understand a bit of a background. There was a corruption case that was unfolding in the state of Andhra Pradesh. This corruption case was being investigated by the Anti-Corruption Bureau of the state of Andhra Pradesh. According to this FIR filed by the Anti-Corruption Bureau, it had included the former Advocate General in this FIR. So what does the former Advocate General do? He immediately heads to the High Court of Andhra Pradesh. Why? Because he feels that his reputation could be at stake. So he heads to the High Court of Andhra Pradesh and requests the High Court of Andhra Pradesh to issue an gag order. So what is a gag order? A gag order is a legal order issued by the court of law where this particular order will prevent the media, will prevent the press and the visual media to issue any of these notifications and discuss this particular issue. So what exactly happens? Because there was a corruption case, because it included former Advocate General, he heads to the High Court and now the Chief Justice of the High Court issues a gag order which prevents the media and other responsible people from discussing this particular issue. This gives rise to certain questions in particular with reference to the right of press and the freedom of speech as well. Let's try and understand what are these various issues. When it comes to the issues surrounding this particular issue, there was no material to justify such censorship. Just because it happens to be the former Advocate General, just because he goes to the High Court of Andhra Pradesh, issuing such an order is not fair. Why? Because there was no material which allows for such a censorship. This is the first major concern. The second major concern is this particular order also made sure that the investigating officers had a stay when it comes to the investigation. So what was happening right now? We have the Anti-Corruption Bureau which was investigating one of the corruption charges. With this particular order, what happens? There has to be a stay with respect to the investigation conducted by the Anti-Corruption Bureau. Now the question is, can the High Court halt such an investigation? The answer to this is yes. We have the Constitution of India. Under this, we have Article 226 which speaks about the writ jurisdiction of the High Court. So the High Court, in case it feels that there is violation of justice or it has to achieve the ends of justice, it would be able to invoke Article 226 under extraordinary circumstances. And at the same time, we also have the Code of Criminal Procedure under section 482 which also prevents the abuse of process of any court under its jurisdiction. As a consequence, High Courts do have the power to halt an investigation or a trial conducted by an executive agency. Here comes the question, but when can this be exercised is what we also have to look at, because this cannot be invoked arbitrarily by the court of law as well. This is where the Supreme Court also steps in. The Supreme Court in one of the cases said in Imtiaz Ahmad versus the state of Uttar Pradesh and others, this happened in the year 2012. What did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said that there are large number of cases which are being halted by the High Courts of different territory. So what is exactly happening? There are large number of cases which are also struck in the High Courts. So it is asking the High Courts that you would be able to invoke and halt such a particular investigation only in extraordinary circumstances, only when you are sure that justice is not being delivered. This cannot be invoked normally, but this can be invoked only when there is abuse of the process and in order to promote the ends of justice. So remember the words abuse of the process. But the problem is the Supreme Court failed to come up with the definition of what is this abuse of the process. Because there is no standard set of abuse of the process, the High Courts are invoking as and when they want it. And at the same time, we also have another judgment of Sahara versus SEBI in the year 2012. According to this particular judgment, preventive relief can be and should be provided both to the people who are facing the trial, and this also means the media, which is actually the voice of the people, which helps the people know what exactly is happening in the country, should also be given the freedom of press as well. So a balancing act of free trial and at the same time freedom of press has to be balanced. So what happens in this particular case? It says that temporary restraint can be imposed on the publication, but after a particular particular amount of time, after due consideration, this can also be coming up in the general forum. How? Through the public media. So what we have to understand is that there can be a temporary restraint on the publication only in cases of real and substantial risk of prejudice, and not in all the circumstances. The Supreme Court further looks into number of cases across the length and breadth of India. It looks at couple of cases in High Court, and finally it has come up with three important interpretations. So what are these important interpretations according to the Supreme Court of India? In case the High Court is coming up and interpreting this particular stay onto a particular investigation, it can be invoked, but such an invocation will have to be exercised with due caution as well as circumspection as well. Once such a power is exercised, High Court should not lose on the side of the case. Yes, we have put an end or a temporary ban to that particular investigation, but at the same time, the High Court should not lose track of this particular case. In case there has been a temporary halt, the High Court should also finish this particular case as early as possible, but preferably within 6 months, says these three guidelines given by the Supreme Court of India. So in case there is any High Court which is issuing an order staying the investigation conducted by the executive authorities, it has to comply by the three rules laid by the Supreme Court of India. Also remember, this is not the only case. There have been previous such cases as well. We have our MP Tejasvi Surya, who represents Bangalore. Before he actually became the member of parliament, there were allegations against Tejasvi Surya. So he goes to the court of law, he goes to the sessions court in Bangalore, and the sessions court immediately releases a gag order. So the media could not actually come out with different allegations against Tejasvi Surya. This was before he became the member of parliament. After this was taken to the High Court, the High Court set aside this gag order as well. This is one other example as well. So what is the major issue here, and what is the conclusion that we can draw? Because there has been a stay with respect to investigation, because there has been a gag order issued by the High Court of Andhra Pradesh, this is a blanket gag order which is against the free speech, against the freedom of the press and the citizens' right to know about what is happening in the society. In case this persists, then this is a violation of a fundamental right. So such omnibus orders should not be imposed by the High Court. In case it feels that there is a particular media outlet that is exaggerating certain issue, only such people should be called in. So what is that we have to understand? Whenever such restraint orders or gag orders are released, issued, such will have to be specific to a particular media outlet, or this will violate the fundamental rights of the freedom of expression and the freedom of press, says this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says nationalism and the crisis of federalism. You know what the beauty of India is? It is its diversity. We have myriad religions, languages, customs, traditions, cuisine, ethnic groups and attires. After India attained its independence, many Western countries, in fact skeptics, also assumed that India cannot exist because of these differences. We have proved them wrong and will keep proving them wrong forever. In the light of this background, the author brings an idea of respecting the diversity and the idea of federalism, which depicts an aspect of diversity. He brings into discussion how India and its diversity has evolved. He brings into the concept of three types of nationalism. One is within the idea of ethno-religious identity. Second is what is on the idea of secularism, called as the civic nationalism. Third is an idea of geographical location and linguistic identities, which he calls coalescent nationalism. Let's try and understand what are these three aspects as supported by the author under this editorial. When we speak about this particular idea of ethno-religious identity, this was present back in the 1930s. So what exactly happens with respect to ethno-religious identity? According to this particular concept, we have the communities, we have the people who want to have countries on the basis of religion. That's how India was divided. India basically believed that India is a secular country. India has people of all different religions, languages, ethnicity, so on and so forth. But the Muslim League back then did not believe in this particular concept, and this is how bifurcation of India happens, creating what is called as India and Pakistan. This was also supported by the cause of Hindu Mahasabha as well. So back in 1930s, you have the Muslim League which wanted a separate country for the Muslims, and you have Hindu Mahasabha which also was supporting a similar cause where they wanted a country for the Hindus as well. So this particular identity of owning to the religion and creating a country is what is called as ethno-religious identity. So this is based on this particular fact of religion as a unique cultural identity and creating what is called as a different country on the basis of religion. Then we have the concept of what is called as civic nationalism. This was also present in 1930s. This was also present in 1940s as well as after independence as well. So what is this civic nationalism? This does not believe in the concept of religion. This believes in the principle of pluralism. This believes in the concept of diversity. This believes in the concept of secularism. It believes in the concept of inclusionness, and it believes in taking forward every single person in the country. So this is a representational value. This is about the representational diversity value, and it takes every single person along it. So what is the civic nationalism? It is taking into picture the historical experience, the struggle against the British colonial rule, where we all came together and fought against an external enemy, against the colonial powers. It is this that is taken into picture rather than religion or any other cultural identity. So what is important here? That it is a composite culture which is inclusive in nature. Then we have something called as the coalition nationalism. What is this coalition nationalism? This was prevalent again in 1930s, but it dropped during the 1940s. Why it dropped? That is because what was given importance was to the civic nationalism. We wanted to throw an external alien. That is why language did not become a barrier, but we all united under one single identity, and that is the identity of India and Indianness. So this particular period of 1940s did not have the coalition nationalism, and it started reappearing after the 1956 and thereafter. What is this coalition nationalism? We have India, which is one single identity. Under India, we have different geographical locations. We have different cultures. One such cultural identity is the language, which we can also call as linguistic identity. So basing the argument of the coalition nationalism is where the language identity comes into picture, and there is geographical indication which is divided. There is geographical position which is divided on the basis of language, on the basis of linguistic identity. So what is this coalition nationalism? This is where India is viewed as one single identity, but within India there are geographical locations which are divided on the basis of linguistic identity. Then what happens? We have the independence of India. After independence of India, there was immediately rejection of this ethno-religious identity. India completely rejected itself and it called itself the secular country, unlike the country Pakistan, which defined itself on the basis of theology. So in India, we called ourselves secular. And at the same time, the central government also started viewing the linguistic identities in a negative limelight as well. Why? That is because according to the central government back then, they believed that in case they are grouped on linguistic identities, they can mobilize the forces, mobilize the people, and this can result in vociferous tendencies as well. There could be a possibility where the states, in the name of linguistic identity, can break away from India. Such was the apprehension and fear of the central government. That is why they were not organized on the basis of linguistic identities initially. So what was the idea here? The idea was to make sure that in case there is breaking up of the state or we are creating new state, it is only on the basis of administrative convenience, and this will not be on the basis of linguistic identity. This is when number of people also felt that the idea of coalition nationalism based on the linguistic identities will not be implemented. But there was an issue as well. What what we had was number of princely states. These princely states had to be put into states as well. So this required committees to be formed. And boundaries to be drawn as well for the administrative convenience. This is where the central government of India also issued one of the committees to come into picture. That committee was what is called as SK Dar committee. So this SK Dar committee was asked a simple question, whether there has to be categorization of boundaries on the basis of linguistic identities or it has to be on administrative convenience. It favored reorganization on the basis of administrative convenience rather than on the linguistic considerations. Then we have another group as well. That is what is called as the JVP committee. This JVP committee means it is Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel and Pattabi Sitaramaiah. They also examined this particular issue, whether it has to be on the linguistic basis or it is on the administrative convenience. Again, this particular committee dismissed the idea of reorganization on the linguistic basis. While all this was happening, there was something else that was happening in different parts of the country, and that is for the autonomy of shared political power. That is where there were number of agitations in different parts of the country. Why? Because they wanted states on the basis of linguistic identity. So one such state which was created on the basis of linguistic identity was the state of Andhra Pradesh. Why? Because there was a long drawn agitation and death of Potti Sriramulu after a hunger strike. Because Potti Sriramulu passed away, there was creation of Andhra Pradesh, which became a state for the Telugu speaking people. So once this particular issue started, there were number of other states, number of autonomy groups, number of people who started claiming for a linguistic identity. That is where one of the committees headed by Fazl Ali came into picture. It broadly accepted language as the basis of reorganization of the state, but it rejected the idea of one language for every single state. So India slowly became what is called as the coalition nation state, moving from holding together concept to what is called as the coming together concept. So what is this coalition nationalism here? You have the reorganization of the state on the basis of linguistic identity, which also gave birth to new type of regional parties in all the states in southern part of India and in different parts of India, and these people also started representing in the parliament as well. So what we have is the regional groupings, what we have is the regional political parties. What was once unitary with one single party at the national level representing throughout India is now being replaced by multiple political parties. So a unitary setup became ideally what is called as the real federal setup. With the imposition of this real federal setup, what we have is discussions, consent, participation by the state government in the central arena as well. So the author in this particular article says that coalition nationalism has worked well for India. Why? Because there is more division of powers, actual federalism between the central government and the state government. But this has not worked well for the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which happens to be now a union territory, and in the northeast part of India as well. Indeed, the Indian experience shows that in case we have the central government which is non-manipulative, treated politicians and people of regional states with respect, the entire polity, the politics of the nation works well, and there is no issue between the state government as well as the central government. But if the central government is not respecting the values of the state government and it is imposing certain facts against the ethos of the state government, whether it is language, whether it is religion or any other parameter which is not in sync with the value system of that state government, that is when it creates grave instability, says the author of this article. So what is the way forward? The way forward is that center will have to work in all those areas which it is meant to work. The state governments will have to work in all those areas which it is meant to work. There should be no coercive federalism. Instead, what we require is coordinating federalism, ideally taking the viewpoints of the state government, respecting the values of the state government, and ultimately this will serve both the central government and the state government and will not be a chaos when it comes to the administration, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about agreement between Israel as well as United Arab Emirates. The background to this has been explained on 16th of August 2020 under the fourth topic, how will the Israel UAE impact the Gulf? So kindly look into it. We will not be discussing the background, so the link for the same will also be given in the description box. Our focus today will only be on what is called as the Abraham Accords, which was signed by Israel, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain in United States of America. What is the significance of this move? We have Israel and United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signing this particular treaty after the first was signed by Egypt, the second was signed by Jordan, and United Arab Emirates becomes the third country and the fourth country, Bahrain, to actually engage in bilateral relationship with Israel. You have only four Arab countries as of now which directly have a bilateral relationship with Israel as well. Why? Because all these countries did not have good terms and conditions with Israel. But with the establishment of the Abraham Accord, what we will have is conducive relationship going forward. What is the significance of this? Under the agreement, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain would normalize the ties with Israel, and this will better the economic relationship, political relationship, and also security engagement as well. Now what will they do? They will start establishing embassies in each other country. Ambassadors will be placed in these embassies. They will also cooperate and work together in multiple other sectors like tourism, trade, healthcare and security. So this is the significance of this agreement entered by Israel, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. We also have to know the fact that Saudi Arabia is one of the key players when it comes to West Asia as well as controlling the Arabic countries as well. So what is the role of Saudi Arabia when it comes to this particular agreement? Without the consent of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain might not have entered into this particular agreement. So the consent indirectly might not be in public, but indirectly Saudi Arabia might have given suggestions, might have given consent for Bahrain to enter this agreement with Israel. And at the same time, Salman bin, who happens to be the leader of Saudi Arabia, is also treading cautiously. Why? Because recently Riyadh has also opened its airspace for commercial flights between United Arab Emirates and Israel as well. In order to enter United Arab Emirates, it has to fly past Saudi Arabia. So this permission has also been given by Saudi Arabia. So there is an indirect role played by Saudi Arabia in this particular backdrop. Then this happens to be a diplomatic win for Mr. Trump as well. Why? Because he wanted to establish peace in multiple countries. But what did he do? He wanted to establish peace in West Asia, but he withdrew from this particular treaty with Iran as well. He also wanted to establish peace in Korean Peninsula, but that did not go well when it comes to the North Korea as well. But this particular agreement signed by Israel and two other Arabian countries means that there could be a possibility of advancing peace in the West Asia. Now the real question is, will this diplomatic win for Mr. Trump and the consent given by Saudi Arabia, will it establish peace in West Asia? The answer to this is no. Why? That is because Palestine is one of the countries which has a direct conflict with Israel. In fact, number of other countries like United Arab Emirates or Bahrain or Saudi Arabia might not have engaged in talks directly with Israel, but they always had the back channel diplomacy running with Israel. But the direct conflict was with respect to Palestine. Since the Palestine issue is unresolved, the West Asia crisis and the tussle in West Asia remains unresolved is the first major issue. Now that Saudi Arabia indirectly, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain directly are in direct diplomatic connections with Israel, there will be a possibility where Iran starts engaging and gets close to Palestine, and we will also have Turkey which will start cooperating with Palestine, and now what we will have is three-front war with Palestine. So you have United States of America which is representing one body which is representing Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Then you also have Israel, and you have the third party Palestine represented by Turkey as well as Iran. So what we will have is a three-front issue unfolding in the near future. And at the same time, we also have a sectarian divide in the form of Saudi Arabia and Iran, which are fighting against each other in West Asia. And this is also added by the fact that United States of America is representing one party, supporting one party, and Russia is supporting another party. So if all these forces are running for the hegemony, for domination in this particular region, how will peace be ensured in West Asia? Added to this, in case there has to be peace in this particular region, the first major point that one has to address is the issue of Palestine, says this particular article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Lok Sabha not to amend Banking Act. What is the context? The Lok Sabha has passed an amendment to the Banking Regulation Act of 1949. According to it, the cooperative banks will now come under the direct supervision of the RBI. Why did the government initiate such an initiative? That is because under the watchful eyes of the RBI, the commercial banks are kept under check as well. Now, the government wants to make sure that the cooperative banks are also coming under the check of the RBI. Why? Because that is to safeguard the interest of the depositors. It also makes a fact check as well. According to the government, there were about 430 cooperative banks that had either been delicensed, they have been liquidated over the last 2 decades, but not a single commercial bank has gone into liquidation under the oversight of the RBI. So it now feels that in case there is direct supervision of the RBI with respect to the cooperative banks, then they would be able to support the interest of the depositors. And we have also seen that there is a lot of stress due to the pandemic as well. During these stressful conditions, it is the RBI which should be able to maintain and keep a check on the cooperatives. So what would the RBI do? The RBI would be allowed to amalgamate or reconstruct that particular cooperative bank so that it is able to make sure that there are checks and balances with respect to the operation of the cooperative banks. A detailed analysis will also be discussed in our economy this week. As of now, this is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Maldives defends ties with India. Before we understand what this article is, let's look into the background. We have the former Maldives president Abdul Yamin, who was very close to China. Because he was close to China, he started neglecting India as well. As he was close to China, China started pumping huge amount of money. Millions of dollars was invested in infrastructure projects, and this did not have good relationship with India as well. As a result, what was exactly happening? India and Maldives relationship was deteriorating during the presidency of former Maldives president, that is Abdul Yamin. Then we also have the replacement of him with the new government as well. After the new government took over, this person, that is Abdul Yamin, was arrested under the Money Laundering Act. He was also sentenced to about 5 years of imprisonment as well. Now what we have is the government headed by President Soleh, but the opposition political parties, which was once headed by Abdullah Yaman, is criticizing President Soleh and his political party. Why? Because they believe that there is foreign military presence in the Maldivian soil, in an indirect hint to India as well. The minister from the government, that is Mr. Abdullah, is now criticizing the opposition party and said that Maldives will continue to have fruitful relationship with India. In this particular backdrop, we also have to understand what has been the economic impact of COVID-19. Maldives is one of the countries which basically has its entire economy based on tourism. Now, because of COVID-19 restrictions, people are not able to go to Maldives. As a result, their economy is suffering significantly. To prevent this particular issue and also to support Maldives during this particular crisis, India has also given $250 million special financial assistance to overcome the impact of COVID-19. This is not all. There are issues and concerns within the government as well. What are these issues? We have the former president of Maldives, who is now the speaker, telling to the president that there are people, there are ministers who are accused of corruption in the government, and such ministers will have to be removed from the government. The speaker further goes on to say that the presidential system, which is currently present in Maldives, will have to be replaced by a parliamentary system. In case that happens, this will strip off number of powers that are currently there with president as well. So this is the internal dilemma that is happening within the government. So these issues will also have to be sorted. So what is the way forward? When it comes to India, India should give special preference, commitments and incentives like how it is giving to Afghanistan. India did assist in building the parliament. India did assist in building the Salma Dam. A similar approach will also have to be taken in Maldives as well. India should be proactive in its approach and not reactive when it comes to China's issue. And at the same time, whenever India is making contributions, it is mostly in the form of donations. But what does China do? China provides loans, but India provides donations. This will have to be known to the people of Maldives as well. India is not putting that particular country in a debt trap, but China is putting Maldives into a debt trap. This will have to be known to the people of Maldives so that they decide and select that political party which has a close cooperation with India is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. With reference to Kathak, which of the following statements is or incorrect? It is only classical dance of India having links with Muslim culture. Kathak is the only form of classical dance wedded to Hindustani or the North Indian music. Take a pause, break this particular video, answer this particular question, and then start off with the video. The answer to this is none. Why? Because both the statements are correct. Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer is none. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. Acute encephalitis syndrome predominantly affects population below 15 years. Japanese encephalitis usually coincides with monsoon and post-monsoon period when the density of mosquito increases. Which of the above statements are correct? Take a pause, answer, and then get back to the video. The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, acute encephalitis syndrome, including Japanese encephalitis, is a group of clinically similar neurological manifestation which is caused by viruses, bacteria, fungus, parasites, spirochetes, as well as chemical toxins. The outbreak of Japanese encephalitis usually coincides with monsoon and post-monsoon period. JV has its endemic zones running along Gangetic Plain, states of UP East, Bihar, West Bengal and Assam, and some parts of Tamil Nadu. JV has no cure for the disease. Treatment is focused on relieving severe clinical signs and supporting the patient to overcome the infection. Kindly remember all these important facts. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to National Crimes Records Bureau. It was set up in 1986 to function as a repository of information on crime and criminals. It was based on the recommendations of Tandon Committee, National Police Commission and Ministry of Home Affairs Task Force. It functions as a national storehouse of fingerprint records of the convicted persons, including the fingerprints of the foreign criminals. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So the NCRB is headquartered in New Delhi and as part of the Ministry of Home Affairs. The NCRB has also been designated as the central nodal agency to manage technical and operational functions of the online cybercrime reporting portal through which any citizen can lodge a complaint or upload a video which can act as an evidence for crime related to child pornography, rape or gang rape. Now let's look into the next practice question. Variations in the length of daytime and nighttime from season to season are due to Earth's rotation on its axis. Wrong. The Earth's revolution around the sun in an elliptical manner. This is wrong. Latitudinal position of the place. No, it is because of the revolution of the Earth on a tilted axis. Now let's look into the mains practice question. A blanket gag order by the judiciary is against free speech, freedom of the press and the right to know. Discuss the need for exercising such an order sparingly with caution and circumspection. Next question. Efforts at cooperative federalism have to be strengthened on the basis of consent and participation to ensure political stability and deepening the center-state relations. Elaborate. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.